I was thrilled when the Chief Rabbi graciously accepted my request to be the guest speaker for Seed this evening. I asked him on the day when he enthralled a Seed audience in Boreham Wood when we had a one-day seminar, and he introduced the one-day seminar. And he graciously accepted immediately. And the reason that he accepted was because the Chief Rabbi is a champion of Jewish education. In fact, he has made it one of the pillars of his Chief Rabbinate. The Chief Rabbi has a unique ability to combine eloquence, depth, wit, and humor, and something which I admire so much, he has the ability, quite uncanny, to take a difficult concept and distill it into one or two crisp, sharp sentences. He is equally at home in the House of Lords as he is in the house of the Lord. At one and the same time, he is an ambassador for the Jewish people and a rabbi and teacher to the Jewish people. Educated in Oxford and Cambridge, he took smicha in Jews College and in Eitz Chaim. He has 14 honorary degrees, has been awarded numerous prizes, and has written 24 books. I haven't even written a paragraph. Chief Rabbi has written 24 books. Incredible. He was knighted by Her Majesty the Queen in 2005 and made a life peer in 2009. And I could really go on, but if I wouldn't be an introducer, it would be a speech in its own right. And therefore, without further ado, it is my honor and privilege and pleasure to ask the Chief Rabbi to address us this evening. Thank you.
Rabbi Grunfeld, Dan Ehrentrow, Chief Rebbitzin Lau. The Chief Rebbitzins outnumbered the Chief Rabbis 2-1 this evening, which is a really good proportion. It is an enormous privilege to join you in this wonderful cause. Rabbi Grunfeld, you're quite right. I have to divide my time nowadays between the House of Lords and the House of the Lord, but if you are ever offered a choice, always choose the house of the Lord. Why? Because in the house of the Lord, only the rabbi gives a speech. In the house of the Lord, everyone gives a speech. What's even worse is that when somebody else is speaking, everyone else has to listen. This is the biggest culture shock I ever had in my life. And it's quite true, I've written 24 books, or 25, I just finished the next one. But I will never forget my mother, Allah Shalom, saying to me, Jonathan, when are you going to write a book I can understand? But friends, I'm really here just to say an enormous thank you to some extraordinary people in our community. First, our beloved, Rabbi Joey Grunfeld, National Director of Seed, and, in my view, a national treasure of Anglo Jewry. I want to recognize and thank for their unbelievable contributions two remarkable people, Rabbi Malcolm Herman, Assistant National Director, and Rabbi Avi Lazarus, Operations Director. You too have done miracles. And to everyone involved in Seed, it's a great organization. I want to say a special thank you to our beloved host this evening, to Alan and Marsha Lee and Alan and Marsha Mazel Tov on Julia's engagement. May she bring you much nachas and all your children. To Edward and Yes. Edward, Alan, you've been absolutely incredible, and I am so moved that you are doing this in memory of your beloved and much missed parents, Arnold Oliver Shalom and Helen Oliver Shalom. They loved Jewish learning, both of them. You know, even when your mother was so unwell, she would still come to shul, she would sit there, she would be totally involved, and always telling your father what to do. And your father, Olav Shalom, was the chairman of Jews College when I first came. Both of them had a huge appreciation for Torah, its teachings, and its teachers. And I cannot think of anything you could do to bring more nachas ruach to them in heaven than sponsoring this evening tonight and allowing Seed to continue its incredible work. Friends, for 30 years and more than 30 years, Seed has been quietly transforming Anglo Jewry. I remember the first program that I knew about. I didn't ask Joey if this was the first that was done in conjunction with the United Synagogue, but I remember Rabbi Morris Hoole introducing it into Kingsbury, and it was then considered really an avant-garde thing, because until then, who needed to learn? If you were a member of the shul, you had the rabbi to learn for you, and if you were the rabbi, you were supposed to be showing galut. You should have learned already. And therefore, the idea that you needed to learn was very, very strange. However, there are certain people who see possibilities other people don't. I think of people like Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, Larry Page, Sergey Brin, Mark Zuckerberg, and Joey Grunfeld. And if you ask why doesn't Seed do a public flotation like Facebook, well, the answer was given in the Gemara in Pesachim a long time ago. The Gemara actually says that they ordained 24 public fasts so that teachers of Torah would never get rich. Why, says the Gemara? Because if they got rich, would they be teachers of Torah? So therefore, you cannot do a public flotation of Seed. However, I do believe that Seed has done more than Facebook ever could to create real chevruta, real friends. The truth is, a chevruta, a learning friendship, is not like a Facebook friendship. It is a transforming experience. Two people learning together, grow together, and that is a unique relationship. There's nothing like it in the world. Chazal went so far as to say that if you learned from your teacher even one halacha, then if, God forbid, that person passes away, you have to do kriyah as if that was a close relative of yours. It is as if somehow that person gave birth to something in you that means that you are permanently changed by them. And there is no deeper friendship than the friendship that comes from chevruta in Torah learning, and that's what Seed always was, and I hope always will be. We have seen in one generation an almost miraculous transformation in Anglo Jewry. You know, 1993, 19 years ago, do you know how many children were going to Jewish schools just under 20 years ago? 25% of Anglo Jewry. Today, 19 years later, we are almost on 70%. It's been a complete transformation of the community. We've built more day schools in Anglo Jewry in these last 20 years than at any comparable time in Anglo-Jewish history. And we have been building, and I humbly acknowledge this, all the great work that my beloved and saintly predecessors, Sir Israel Brody zt'l and Lord Jacobovitz did. But there's been a revolution. And that we know about. We see all these new Jewish schools. But there's been another revolution in adult education. And that really is what Seed has brought about. I remember when I became a Rav in Golders Green in 1978, and I suggested, let's do a Tikkun, leil, shavuot. Nobody had ever heard of such a thing. 1983, went to Marble Arch and said, let's do a Tikkun, leil, shavuot. Nobody ever heard of such a thing. Mind you, in Marble Arch, they all came to the Tikkun, leil, shavuot with bottles of whiskey and vodka, so it was a little hard going. But at any rate, it was... Nobody had ever thought, you sit, you learn. A Jew, what is a Jew? A Jew is somebody who learns. And now Anglo Jewry has been transformed. Everyone knows. You learn. And that is something Seed achieved. I don't know if we fully realize the extent of this revolution. You know, we're just going to come up later this year in August, I think, to the end of DaFiomi. the cycle of DaFiomi. Do you know how few people DaFiomi started with back in 1929, Rabbi Shapiro of Lublin, zt'l? They are expecting this year in New York alone, in New Jersey alone, 90,000 people to come for the Siyum, for the conclusion of DaFiomi. They're holding it at a baseball stadium, the only place big enough to hold them. We are seeing the greatest flowering of Torah learning that perhaps our people have seen in 1,000 and 2,000 years. And that, DaFiomi itself, was just the result of one little seed planted by Rabbi Shapiro. And the incredible thing is that the more people are learning Torah, the more people are appreciating Torah. And it's incredible how relevant it remains to all sorts of issues today. I'm constantly flabbergasted. I find myself in strange positions. For instance, do you remember there was a conference on climate change a couple of years ago in Copenhagen? And the Environment Secretary, a young man called Ed Miliband, decided he was going to, he thought it would be nice to get a bracha from religious leaders. I shouldn't, anyway. Anyway. So we gathered together all the leaders of the faiths, and they said, Chief Rabbi, Zog Epers on climate change. So I said, I have a very simple suggestion on climate change. Let the world keep Shabbos. We'll cut carbon emissions by 1/7. End of climate change. This is absolutely true story. An imam came up to me and said, Chief Rabbi, you know what? I never thought about that before. I'm going to ask all our imams to tell people not to drive to the mosque on Friday. I said, once you finish that, you can tell all the people in shul not to drive to shul on Shabbat. It's gewaldig, but I mean seriously, and in all seriousness, Parshas Bahar B'chukosai. You know, after this horrendous business with the current state of financial markets and so on, just a few weeks ago, the Financial Times got in touch with me just to ask, what does Judaism say about personal debt, about building up high levels of personal debt such as we have in Britain and America, and ultimately the cause of this overheating and the collapse of financial institutions. And obviously it's there in Parshas Bahar B'chukosai. We read in Torah a couple of weeks, just this past Shabbos, and it remains relevant. Did you know that the International Program of Debt Relief, taken out by the United Nations and 41 different countries 12 years ago for the reduction and remission of debt to developing countries, was called Jubilee 2000. It was built on the ideas that we read this past Shabbos, 3,300 years old, and yet they remain more up to date than most of the economic theories today. I mean, I find this incredibly, incredibly moving. And I find it incredibly moving that institutions that we have known about for so long remain incredibly relevant. I mean, think about this. Moshe Rabbeinu. Now, what a Novi. When he gave us at Har Sinai, or even before Har Sinai, the mitzvah of Shabbos. Now, he knew Shabbos is the liberation from slavery in Egypt. Did he know that Shabbos was going to be liberation from the slavery of Blackberries and iPhones and text messages? Did he know? And yet, in a strange way, Shabbos is as much a liberation in getting back to human values today as it was then. I saw a survey that came out on the 30th of January this year by one of Britain's cancer charities. Very interesting survey. I don't know if you saw it. It said that it was a survey of 18 to 30-year-olds throughout Britain. The average Brit between the ages of 18 and 30 has 237 Facebook friends. When asked on how many of those can you rely, 2/3 said 2 or less. And you think to yourself, because of Shabbos, we have to be there with real people. And we have to make real friendships and be part of a real community, knowing that if, God forbid, we ever need the help of that community, they will be there for us as they know we will be there for them. And that is Shabbos in the 21st century as relevant today as it was then. So this is the beauty of Torah, that today, because of our schools, our children, and because of Seed, we as adults are engaging with the truth of Torah, with the timelessness of Torah, and with the endlessly renewed message of Torah. And this is something beautiful. And as for Torah, Talmud Torah itself, just learning in the Seed way, you know that Chazal said that learning is higher even than prayer. And nobody in Anglo-Jewry really understood this until very recently. I did a little thing, a siddur, you know, the green siddur with the whatever it is. And I discovered, retranslating what used to be known as the Singer's Prayer Book, that there was a mistranslation there for 100 years and nobody ever noticed. It's in Yukum Purkan. This is not everyone's favorite bedside reading, so somehow nobody had ever noticed this. But it's very interesting. In Yukum Purkan, those two prayers just before the prayer for the Queen, we pray for Zara Chaya V'Kayama, for healthy children. Zara Delo Yifsuk V'Lo Yivdul Mipiska Me'araisa, which is was translated for 100 years as children who will not break with or neglect any of the words of the law. Is that what Asher lo yifsuk v'lo yivdul mipiska me'araisa means? No. It means, may we have children who never stop learning. But Anglo-Jewry couldn't understand that before. And now Kanena Hara, they can. So I changed the translation, and nobody noticed that either. But anyway. And this is what it is to be a Jew. You never stop learning. I always tell this story, and it still sends a shiver down my spine. I mean, unfortunately, once, shouldn't know such things. I was once very unwell. I was rushed into hospital. Almost before I knew what was happening, I was under a general anesthetic. And I wake up after the operation in my room, just coming out of my general anesthetic, and there's a knock at the door. And I say, come in, and there's an elderly gentleman from one of our shuls, holding under his arm a big volume of Shas, and he says, Rabbi Sacks, I heard you were here, now we can learn together. I'm trying to die. He wants to sit and have a Gemara shir. This is to be a Jew. You never stop learning. I had the great zechus 1 year of taking Myrov, my head of Jews College when I was a student there, Reb Nachum Rabinovich. His car was going in for service, so I gave him a lift home, and it was a hot summer's day, and we were, do you know that point in Hampstead High Street, just by the underground station, you know, just as before you go up to the Heath? My car wouldn't go. What do you call it? I haven't driven for all these years. You know. They don't trust the Chief Rabbi to drive a car. Knowing my driving, neither would I. But at any rate, the car stalled, and I couldn't stop. So he turned to me and said, listen, if the car is stalled, this means Hashem wants us to learn Torah together. He starts to give me a long shir on the Rambam, Hilchos Shmita v'Yovel. Meanwhile, the cars are piling up in all directions, honking, hooting, completely unmoved. He gets to the end of the shir, gives me the Chiddush on the Rambam. He says, now turn the key, and the car started. To be a Jew is never to stop learning, and therefore never to stop growing. Friends, because of Seed, we, each one of us in this room this evening, know what that means. I cannot thank Seed enough. I cannot thank it enough especially for its partnership with the United Synagogue. It's really changed the feeling. And because of Seed, Anglo-Jewry has become a learning community. And I say to Seed, Kol HaKavod. Friends, I just end with a little story which I enjoyed I heard it from the French Chief Rabbi. He told me the story about a fruit seller who opened a shop in the Lower East Side of New York, and he wasn't getting much business, and he wanted to know why, and he had a friend who said to him, look, this is a very Jewish area, so I think it would be good for business if you put a sign on your shop, fresh fruit from Israel. So he put this sign up. The friend comes back a week later. Did it make a difference? Incredible. We've had lots and lots of people coming to buy. What a fantastic idea. So next week he decides, well, let's get one better. Fresh fruit from Jerusalem. The friend comes back a week later. How was it? Fantastic, even bigger crowds. The next week he decides to go one better. And he says, fresh fruit from the Kotel. A week later, his friend comes back and says, how is that? He says, terrible. He says, why? Well, they all come in, kiss the fruit, and then they leave. Friends, Anglo Jewry used to be a place where you kissed the Sefer Torah and you left. Now, because of Seed, we learn Torah. May we continue to learn. May we, Seed, continue to keep planting. May all of us continue to keep growing. And may Hashem bless all you do.